you need to start a garden. It is imperative that you start a garden. Provide food resources for yourself and your family. You want to do this sooner rather than later. Hey everybody, it's Tanya and I'm back with another Talkie Tuesday video. I'm really excited about this video. I'm excited to talk about this subject, which of course, again, is near and dear to my heart, and that is homesteading, gardening, taking care of myself and my family, and being able to provide for us. So I have a whole new topic that I want to talk about today, so let's jump into it. So you're paying attention to the times, you've been looking at current events, you know that you need to be better prepared to take care of yourself, your family, and your loved ones. And now you're wanting to know what you need to do. What are the first steps that you need to do? You know that you need to provide shelter, food, and water. You're ready to take the first step to gain some useful skills and to provide some of your family's food resources on your own. So how do you do it? You start a garden. And as always, I'm going to be referring to my notes as I talk to you all. So if I look down, don't be alarmed. I'm just checking my notes. The things I'm going to mention today are basic steps in the process. You can do further research to learn more in detail, but I want to get you started today with some basic skills. So in starting your garden, the first thing that you need to know is your hardiness zone. According to the USDA, the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map is the standard by which gardeners and growers can determine which perennial plants are most likely to thrive at a location. According to gardeningknowhow.com, hardiness refers to a plant's ability to survive winter temperatures. So in other words, the hardier the plant, the more able it is to withstand winter temperatures. Also, according to the same site, a hardiness zone is defined by its lowest average annual temperature. Each zone includes a 10-degree range of average minimum temperatures. The coldest zone is 1, and the hottest or the highest is 10. Each zone has 2 subzones, A and B. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to these as planting zones as well. They're talking about the same thing. I am in planting zone 7B. When I lived in Texas, I was in a much higher zone. I want to say I was in like 8B, 9A. And that makes a big difference because you plant at different times of year. You plant different things depending on the zone and how long basically your cold season is, or how long it will be before you can plant something in the warm season. So you want to make sure that you find out your hardiness zone. I'm going to put the website right here for the USDA. They have a great hardiness zone map. All you have to do is plug in your zip code and it will give you your hardiness zone information. With that number letter combination, you're able to figure out what you can plant and when. What you want to do when you find out your hardiness zone is then find a planting schedule for your area, for that zone. You can find that by going to your local library. They often have a planting or a plant section and seed section where you can find out that information. You can also reach out to your local extension office to find out the planting schedule for your state and for the different zones in your state. That is the kind of information that you want to have before you ever start getting into the garden to start trying to plant anything. Know your hardiness zone and then get a planting schedule for that zone. A planting schedule is really useful because it shows you what time of year you can plant what seeds, when you need to start them as seeds if you're going to create seedlings before you put them in the ground, when you're going to harvest those seeds, when it's too late to plant a certain type of crop. You really need to make sure that you find that information for the area that you live. Don't just start planting stuff willy-nilly. That's not going to work out for you. Once you find out what your zone is, you need to decide where you're going to garden. The type of home you live in is going to determine where and how you garden. So if you live in a home that has a front yard and or a backyard, you can plant in either one of those areas as long as it's permissible. If you live in an apartment, you may be limited to a patio. In the last place that I lived, I actually even planted on the driveway in containers. So there are a lot of options you can choose from. I have definitely used patios, driveways, front yards, and backyards to garden. The main thing that you have to be concerned about is suitable sunlight. You want to make sure that you have at least 8 to 10 hours of sunlight in the specific areas where you would need to garden. Some people that have a patio that faces sunlight most of the day have an excellent environment, whereas some people have a garden or a yard in front of their homes or in the back of their homes, but it doesn't get a lot of sunlight, and so that's not a suitable location. So you're really going to be focusing on how much sunlight you get over an extended period of time in the area where you want to garden. Plants do quite well as long as they have adequate sunlight and nutrients. Once you've determined where you're going to garden, you need to figure out what type of method you want to use. And what I mean by that is you need to figure out if you want to plant in ground, in a raised bed, or in containers. There are a lot of different options for gardening. I like these three, and I've used all three of them in different stages. So in ground obviously means you're going to be planting in the ground, in the soil around you that's already in your yard. In a container means you're going to be planting in some kind of tub or a grow bag or some kind of bucket or a basket, some kind of container that's containing the soil that you'll plant within. This is ideal for when you are using a patio or a porch for gardening. The third method is the method that I used when I first got started, and that is raised bed gardening. I put raised beds actually in my yard. A raised bed is a nice area that's a box. It's squared in usually with a wood frame, although you can use other types of material like bricks. So you box in an area and fill that area with soil or other materials for growing, other growing media, and then you plant within that. I really, really loved raised bed gardening because raised bed gardening enables you to use a method called square foot gardening, where you have to measure out square feet within the bed. And that's really easy when you have some kind of square or rectangular shaped bed. So I would measure out how many square feet were there and then determine how many plants could be grown in each square foot. An easy internet search will tell you how many carrots you can grow in a square foot, how many cabbages you can grow in a square foot. And with that information, you can then plant the right amount for each square foot, make sure they're not overcrowded or make sure you don't have too few. And I then used that information years later when I shifted from the raised bed to actually planting in the ground. I still, to this day, even though now I kind of garden in rows, I still use the square foot knowledge to help me figure out how many plants or seedlings or seeds I'm going to put in each square foot. I just kind of eyeball it now. I do get my tape measure out from time to time, but I definitely still use that method of square foot gardening even in rows as well as in a raised bed. Depending on your personality and your likes and your style, you might just want a container garden even though you have a yard where you can put things. That might be easier for you to maintain. You might want to put a raised bed out there that's up on legs because it's harder for you to bend over. A lot of people do that. That is a really great method. I'd actually like to get a couple of raised beds that are several feet off of the ground so I'm not having to bend down, and I can plant things like lettuce or even carrots in those, and those would be easier for me to get to. So there is no one right way to do it. You can have raised beds, you can plant in the ground, you can use containers, you can use all three. You can even use systems in your house. There are nice grow systems that you can have indoors if you don't have any kind of outdoor space at all. You can grow things, trust me. You can grow things. You just have to find the method that works for you and then go for it. Depending on the time of year that it is, you're going to be growing different things. So I kind of divide the types of things you can grow into two different parts of the year: the summer and spring, and then the winter and fall. When I lived in Texas, I could grow pretty much year round. The growing zone was really high. It was warm the majority of the year, and even in the cold months, I could still get some growth in. I still try to do that, even though I'm not in Texas anymore. I'm now in Virginia, which is several growing zones lower. But I still try by covering my plants and increasing the growing zone by covering them with a plastic cover. I make it a bit warmer for them and enable them to live longer throughout the winter. Because remember, your hardiness zone is really based on when things freeze and can no longer grow under natural circumstances. In the winter, which we're heading into now, the fall-winter season, I like to plant brassicas, which are all of your greens like collard greens, cabbage. I might also plant broccoli and cauliflower. Those are in the brassica family as well. I plant kale and Swiss chard. I have also put in some rutabaga. I may put in turnips and carrots, but I'm not too sure about those. But all of those do really well in the fall and into the winter for me here, because the winters don't get too bad that early. And like I said, when I cover those plants with a plastic covering, I'm able to increase the growing zone so that it makes it warmer for them and they're able to last a bit longer. In the spring and summer, or heading into the spring and summer, the things I like to grow and the things that are good to grow during that time of year are squash, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, okra, even though your winter squash or your fall squash like pumpkins. Those are going to get started in the spring so that they are ready by the fall. So you can think about it like the flowering fruits or the flowering vegetables that you eat. Those are the ones that you'll start growing for the summer and spring. The greeny ones, the ones that are more like leafy greens, like collard greens, mustard greens, kale, that kind of thing, you're going to start those in the late summer and early fall so that they can go through the winter and the fall and into winter. Don't be trying to start tomatoes like at the end of August and in September and expect to have them all through like Christmas and stuff. They're just not going to survive unless you live like in zone 10, maybe 9. So we've talked about where you want to plant things. We've talked about what you want to plant. Now let's talk about where to get the seeds. And seeds actually aren't that hard to come by. You would be surprised at how many places are resources for seeds. First and foremost, let me tell you about your local library. Check your local library and see if they have a seed bank. Many libraries do. I had no idea. I was absolutely in shock. But your local library will probably have a seed bank, and it's the same process that you would do to check out to check out books. You go, you have to ask the librarian if there's a seed bank. If there is, you can go take some of the seeds from the seed bank, and what you'll do is after you grow your plants and you leave a little bit and they go to seed, you will then bring seeds back to put in the library so that they have a store or a supply of seeds for the next person who comes along. So definitely don't sleep on your local library. Check the library for a seed bank. Of course, I'm definitely going to recommend the Dollar Tree, because the Dollar Tree has seeds on sale every year, and they are not bad seeds. They are not cheap seeds. They are not GMO seeds. They are excellent seeds for gardening. Check out your Dollar Tree. Of course, you have all of your big box stores like, Home Depot and Lowe's. I've gotten seeds from both of those places before. They're reliable. They work. I like buying seeds online from sellers and from seed growers, seed producers. There are a lot of good companies that you can check out online to buy seeds from. You can also reach out to your local extension office and get seeds from them, or get directions on where to get seeds from them as well. All of these are excellent sources and places where you can find seeds that you can use. Seeds are great, but if you don't know how to plant seeds, they're not going to do you much good. And so a lot of things that you plant have to be started as seedlings first, and then have the seedlings put into the ground once they've grown a little bit. I wasn't sure how to get started at first, but in one of my garden groups, I learned that I needed to use seedlings if I wanted to get greens growing in the winter, and I did not have seedlings. So I decided to go to a store and buy some. And what I discovered is that you can actually just buy seedlings if you don't want to or don't know how to start seeds, and buy as many seedlings as you need to get your garden going for that season. So my first year gardening, I definitely bought seedlings from Home Depot. I'll put a picture of that garden up right now. It was great. We had collard greens. We had some mustard greens. I think we had kale that year. We had a little bit of broccoli and some cauliflower. I was so proud of myself. So definitely seedlings from a store can get you started. The next year, I learned how to start seeds. I have a video on that. I'll post that right here. And in that video, I outlined the process that you need to go through to start seeds. And it's pretty much the same process. You have to put them in the soil, right, in the seed starting mix, water them, cover them, leave them alone. Once they sprout, you put them under grow lights. They grow, they're happy. They grow for X amount of time. Depending on the type of seeds, you may have to transfer them to a larger tray. Some seeds you don't have to. It just depends on the type. And then once they're big and ready to go outside, you kind of shift them slowly outside a few hours every day. And when it's time for them to go in the ground, you put them in the ground, right? So that was a process. I knew it was a process that I would have to learn before I did it. So I just started out buying seedlings, no shame. This year, if you've seen my few videos before this one, you'll know I did not start seeds this year. I didn't do it. I bought a bunch of seedlings. Every single plant in my garden that I planted for the fall, all the collard greens, kale, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and Swiss chard, is all from seedlings that I bought because I didn't get them started in time. And if you don't start them in enough time, they're not going to be able to get into the ground soon enough to really develop good, strong roots and be protected from when it starts to get cooler and the temperatures drop and they have to be resilient in that cool weather. So I just bought seedlings and was very happy with the process, and it has worked out really well. My garden looks beautiful right now. I'm very proud of it. And in January, I'll start seeds for my summer and spring crops, but I'm not worried about it right now. I 100% will buy some seedlings if I haven't started them in time or if I just didn't have the energy to do it. And this year, that was the reality. The next thing that you want to make sure of when you're gardening is that you have good soil. So you're probably going to have to test it, check it out, and amend it if necessary. Soil is key. Listen, gardening is like life. If you have raggedy soil, you're going to have raggedy produce, okay? This is the hardest part of gardening, in my opinion, but it is the most important piece. Test your soil, make sure it's good, make sure it's ready for the plants that you want to grow. How do you do that? You can, again, reach out to your local extension office, take a sample of your soil, deliver it to the extension office. They can test it for you, tell you if there are any nutrient deficiencies, if there's anything you need to do to amend it. You want to make sure that your soil is not too dense and clay-like, or that it's not too sandy and doesn't hold water or just kind of clumps up with water. So there are different ways you can amend it by adding vermiculite or perlite. These substances will either allow for the soil to hold water or allow for the soil to let more water through. And you can also add peat moss, which I lived by when I first moved here and started working this soil. Also in Austin, I had to put a lot of peat moss in the soil, which just makes it more loamy. And plants like a good loamy soil where the water can move through and it holds the water, but not where it's moist and not where it's mushy, but where it lets the water through and then holds a reasonable amount of dampness. That's not drowning your roots. So amending your soil is important. Learning the items that you need so that you can amend your soil is important. Also, determining whether your soil is too alkaline or too acidic, or if it's just right. These might sound like things that are so specific and maybe you feel overwhelmed, but honestly, you can go to Home Depot, buy one of these stakes that you put in the ground, see if the soil is too alkaline or too acidic, and then buy a product right there in the store to make it less acidic or to make it more acidic if you need. You want to make sure that your soil has a good nutrient balance. I really like to use a bit of blood meal and a bit of bone meal, as you've seen in previous videos, just to give my soil a good balance there. I like to use worm castings as well, and I like to use compost, specifically black cow. Now, you don't want to over nutrient your soil, so it is good to test it periodically. And like I said, sending it off to the extension office isn't a really difficult process, and that can help you out so that you get a good nutrient balance in your soil. But if you don't do that, and if you're working on soil that is just, it's under some grass, it's been there, and you don't think there's really a whole lot of nutrients in it, it's not going to hurt you to throw some black cow in that soil once you've worked it up, and to give it a little bone meal and blood meal to get it going. I do also use 13-13-13, which is a combination of potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus. I'm sorry, it's NPK. Anyway, I'll write them on the screen here, but those three nutrients are what your plants need to grow in varying amounts. So you want to have a healthy balance of those in your soil. Peat moss is a great addition to the soil, but it's also not environmentally sound to use it because it has to be harvested from places where it's being depleted. So coconut coir, I think is how it's pronounced, is another option that you might want to use if you're if you need to have soil that's aerated. It's another good option if you don't want to buy peat moss. Remember, y'all, grass is pretty, but it's not going to feed you. Okay, so if you have a yard that is full of grass, you have space to plant a garden. As always, you want to plug in with a community, go to a community garden, join groups online, people that can educate you and help you along the way, and then you can eventually pour back in and help other people. But it is not impossible to get started. There are a lot of resources. There's a lot of information out there for you. You can definitely get started. You can do this. Thank you so much for joining me today, y'all. If you have any questions, please put them down below. If you like this kind of video, please let me know. I would love to keep making more videos like this to educate people and give you input. You need to start a garden. It is imperative that you start a garden. Provide food resources for yourself and your family. You want to do this sooner rather than later. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. Share this video. This is information people need to know, guys. So please share this information in your socials with people that you know. Make sure that you comment because that helps me out with the algorithm. I appreciate y'all so much. Love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.